thank you, Al Wobble, for your technology skills and your PA system, and thanks everybody for being here. I think this is just totally informal. I thought if you want to, we'll just maybe start off with anyone who wants to share their favorite Jesse Jackson story, or more favorite, or memorable, or impactful, or what have you. And then folks who want to stick around, we'll watch some of the service. It's still a little bit confusing what is online today, but we also have the yesterday's to watch too if we want to. So, and I've talked to several of you who only watched parts of yesterday's. So, first of all, I do want to thank the Teamsters who helped us with the coffee and treats today. So I want to pass that thank you along to the Teamsters, and thanks to the Machinists and the Iowa Federation Labor for letting us use the facility today. So if you see them, make sure you tell them thanks. So now you would have thought I would have thought it was my favorite story, but I'm gonna let you tell some. I got too many in my head. I'll find which one I want to tell. But anybody want to start off with some memories of David?
I got way too many stories to tell, so I'm just going to repeat a couple of things that I thought about on the way over. Things that Jesse Jackson said that ring truer than ever for me. One thing he always said, and we still haven't learned the lesson, he talked about electing candidates from the courthouse to the White House. And we just have not, he's been telling us to do that for decades, and we still haven't fully learned that lesson. Another thing that he said that we're still struggling with is a good rural policy is a good urban policy. So sooner or later we're going to figure that out. And one of the few things he said to me personally, I was lucky to spend time with him, but it was usually in a group, almost always with John. But I had a chance in the van one night to ask him. I told him, I'm doing this in Johnson County, and all my, not all my friends, but a lot of people would say, oh, you're such an idealist. It's so unrealistic to support Jesse Jackson, and it's in this white state, and what are you thinking? And what do I tell my friends that tell me I'm a foolish idealist? And he said, tell them you're a realist with high ideals. So I've remembered that my entire life, and will never fully live up to it, but it was a great thing for Reverend Jackson to say.
I don't know how many times I've heard you say that line. So.
That had an impact.
I love that.
And one recent memory really was going with John to the 35th anniversary of the campaigns in Chicago at Operation Rainbow Push. Was just incredible, and that was the last that we saw Reverend Jackson. But he made a point. He said, I want all the people, all the farmers and all the people from Iowa to come up on the stage. And I had to tell John because he couldn't hear very well.
Still can't.
But we got up there, and it was really an amazing thrill to just kind of go back those 35 years. So I'll let other people tell stories, and if there's time, I could tell a few more. But I know that people want to talk. And one last thought: it is just great to be here. I salute everybody that pulled this together, just to see these people some that I didn't know at all, like the Olesons, some that, like John, that I knew but not that well. To be here today is really a treat. And Carl, I've known for years, and Miriam, and also, thanks for putting this together. It's great. Susie, I'm going to hand this to you.
Okay. I'm Susie Olesen from Greenfield. And, well, first of all, Linda Terry's here. And Linda's husband, Dixon, and Linda were fully responsible for Reverend Jackson coming to Greenfield. And so whenever we think of Jesse, we think of Dixon. And that's a gift because he was an extraordinary man. And gosh, the things that he did that most affected me weren't very grand. They were just so human and real. And I remember it was a snowy day in the winter, and I met Carolyn at the Fort Des Moines or one of those old hotels downtown. And the businesswomen of America were meeting in Des Moines. And the Reverend was gonna speak. And we had a little sign-up table, Carolyn and I, and two things happened that day. And I'll tell you, the thing that affected me probably the most was, I said to Carolyn, I wish I could be a Jackson delegate to the National Convention. And she said, well, all you have to do is put your name in and do it and talk to people. And I thought, it's that easy? Well, it wasn't really that easy, but it was pretty easy, actually. So that was, I'll never forget her saying, if you want to do something, you've just got to do it. And, you're not going to be picked. Somebody's not going to say, oh, she looks like a delegate. You just have to say that's what you want to do. That was one really wonderful thing. And I think that in Iowa, right now with the mess we're in, we have to have people who step up and say, yes, I'm going to do that. And then the second thing was the Reverend always, always, always invited the people who did the labor to the room. And he said to these women from all over America who were really successful, you're here because somebody here made your bed and somebody here fixed your breakfast. And they all took, and Willard can tell you, we didn't know what he was saying for a long time, take the Earl bus downtown. And I did not know what he was saying. I was telling Miriam this the other day. The what? The early bus. And I first heard that, I think, that day. Well, I'd heard it before, but I didn't know what it meant. And Carolyn said it means early bus. Anyway, so he was magnificent. The great Linda Terry.
Yeah, I don't know, it's too emotional for me to say too much, but the memory I have mostly of Jesse was that, with no fanfare, or no publicity, he came to the farm, and Dixon Senior and Berlin, and Linda and the kids, my Judy, my wife and I, we brought a guy along, a singer, a gospel singer. We went out to the hillside where Dixon was killed and had a service there. And then he went home. No fanfare. And I would stand up for Jesse Jackson because of that forever. What a selfless man. He meant so much to the Terry's family. Dixon was his advisor in foreign policy. Jesse turned to Dixon on foreign policy. That's what he was. And they were more than that. They were friends, friends for the family. He was always respectful to Linda and the family, beyond politics. So, what a decent human being, and that's the way I remember him. Anyway.
Oh, good morning. My name is Miriam Tyson, and I came in probably after all of you did, but does everybody know everybody here? Okay. Carl?
Hi, I'm Jeannie.
Jeannie?
Laura.
Okay.
I'm
Laura.
Jared.
Jared? Okay. And you are?
Don.
All right. And
Bruce.
Bruce, okay. And Miss Terry, and Susie, and
Susie's husband.
Willard. Oh, my time flies.
Yeah, what happened?
And let's see, we got David, and we have
Nico.
Nico,
Amy.
and Amy, and
Kevin.
Kevin. Well, my name is Miriam Tyson, and I was the chair of the Iowa Rainbow. And I serve in that capacity with David Condon. David passed a few years ago. And so I am, I guess, holding the torch at least for a little bit longer. It is an honor for me to be here with you all, to remember a gentleman, a presidential candidate, a husband, a parent, and just a good friend. I got elected to serve as a delegate in 1988. And we went to the National Convention in Atlanta. And the Jackson delegation, we stayed at a hotel there, and just about all of us got sick. Literally. Deb Turner, she ended up with a virus in her heart. I got sick. I didn't know what was going on, and I felt so miserable. I was there with Peggy Morgan, and she shared a room with me. And I called the desk downstairs and said, "Hey, is there a beauty shop anywhere around here?" And they said, "Yeah, it's not very far away." And in 20 minutes, I cut off all my hair. I don't know what was going on, but we were all sick, literally. But it was so much fun to be around Reverend Jackson. I hosted him in Waterloo. His advance team called and said, "Hey, Reverend Jackson's gonna be in Iowa, so would you like for him to come to Waterloo?" I said, "Yeah, he can come, but he has to be gone by 5 o'clock. Because I have a Janet Jackson concert to go to in Ames, Iowa." And so they said, "Yeah, fine." And so he came. It took us a while to get him here. I had little kids at the airport with balloons waiting on Reverend Jackson. But when he finally got there, we were so excited to see him. But I remember how there were so many people who cared about him. And he wasn't just a politician. And what I loved about him was he embraced everybody. He didn't care if you were black, white, purple. He didn't care if you came from a metropolitan area or if you came from rural. And I loved that about him because he embraced everyone. And he was a lot of fun, but if you're on his advance team or you're hosting him, you gotta be on your P's and Q's. Because I'm telling you, we had all those people in Waterloo in Sullivan Park. We had a stage, and there were hundreds, thousands of people. We also had the Waterloo Police Department. We had some of the policemen on horses. So it was a grand time. So finally, Reverend Jackson got up on the stage, and I looked down, and there were these kids, and he saw those kids, and it was like he was in another stratosphere. And he started talking, and he's trying to talk to the little kids. So I knew that I was on a time limit because we had to take him to another town. So I got a telephone book, and I took off my watch, and I put it in the middle of the book. And I kept going like this so he could see the time. Because I'm like, "Hey, you gotta be out of here because I gotta go to a Janet Jackson concert." So, and then we went to another town, and we had to get an escort because he was gonna be off time. And I was like, "Oh my God, I hope we don't have an accident going to the next town." But, you know, he was just a lot of fun. He belonged to everyone. You know, he's there with us. We're hosting him. We had Senator Harper in the car with us. And what is Jesse doing? On the phone, giving an interview. And we're like, "Dude, we need you to talk to us." You know, everybody was calling for him. But I just love the camaraderie, the environment, the people who were Jesse Jackson supporters, because it was like a family. It was a family, and we could do anything together. And we did. And for years, we worked together and we helped people. And so it's, I think about it and I'm like, a lot of his supporters, they're gone. And so all we can do is to think about the memories that we shared together and what he stood for, and to keep that light going. He is gone, but he's gone to a better place, they tell me. I won't know maybe until I get there. But thank you so much for coming. Thanks to John and this great team. And yes, it would be good to be on another presidential campaign, right? We put this thing together in no time. So thank you so much for coming. And always, always keep him in your heart. Thank you.
Thanks, Miriam. Anybody else want to share? I just wanted you to keep telling stories, because I have, I was blessed to have a front seat in this thing. And I think it's what's hard for me is I have too many. I mean, and Willard and David, you're probably next, because you guys were oftentimes part of the, I don't know, from the luggage team to the Jackson driver to the vans. You guys spent a lot of time on the road with me too, and they were just incredible memories. And Miriam, just to pick up on what you said, in politics forever, so many people, trying to process and calculate the politics and all this stuff. That wasn't part of the Jackson crowd. It was all from the heart and the gut and the consciousness, and that's why we were there. There was, because it's what David said, fighting the Jesse Butt crowd, right? We call him, I think we coined that from Johnson County.
I like Jesse Butt.
I like Jesse Butt. And we talked about that in Chicago, but there was the Jesse Butt crowd. And that's where the realist with high ideals comes from too, but if you like him and he's your favorite, you don't need a butt. Just go with your heart. You don't have to be a political analyst on this thing, and be calculated. And that was true for everyone I met in Iowa that was part of his campaign. It was a sense of confidence and loyalty to him and his message that brought us all together and keeps our bonds today. So thank you for being a part of that. I'm trying to think of what campaign stories to tell you all, but as I said in Chicago, Jesse's often, everyone talks about his rhetorical skills, all those kind of people skills. He loved everybody. I remember, I guess I was telling Alice this story earlier. Alice, my favorite story. This isn't my favorite story, but I think we were in Dallas County, some rural event, and that's when Howard Cosell had made a racist statement. And they had a prior relationship. I remember he wanted to get to a private room, and I heard that conversation, and you could just understand what was on the other end of that line. He was gracious. He never just had such respect for human beings, and I could tell he felt for Howard, because he knew he felt bad about it. It was just so touching to see that warmth, even at that kind of level. I still remember that moment. It was pretty, he just handled it with such grace and dignity. Everywhere it was the easiest campaign I've ever worked on. It may sound strange to you, but one of your biggest challenges in a campaign is building a crowd, great interest in your candidate. Holy cow. It was the flip on that. It's like, how are we gonna make sure the room's big enough? Because you just put the word out, and I think it was after Waterloo, that day we went to Charles City. I'll never forget that. In the park, we arrived, and the whole hillside is covered with people. And he spoke in down the kind of almost like an amphitheater there. So that was an incredible gift to a campaign staff, was you didn't have to worry about building the crowd. You didn't worry about how to deal with the size of the crowd. At those high schools he went to, and those kids coming down clear in northwest Iowa, where you would not expect it, and their parents showed up, and to have them bring kids down to not do drugs and lead them in an I am somebody and keep hope alive. Those were just magical moments that I'm so grateful that I've had a front seat for. And just to see what a gracious, caring human being he was, and all the people that attacked him and the pundits and never really gave him the credit that he deserved for the kind of leader he was. That was, and I never got frustrated by it. You just watch Jesse just keep going forward. You know, that's all just noise, you know. And he had amazing ability to stay focused on what was important. The announcement in Greenfield is still my favorite political event of all time. That was incredible. Who would have thought, with the high school band, right, leading Jesse Jackson in a convertible, and I told this story in Chicago too, and I think it was the Future Farmers of America were there to give him something, and we had the circus tent and the huge crowd, and the Teamsters Bluegrass Band, and the Waterloo Gospel Choir, and the Boy Scouts led the Pledge of Allegiance. It was, I mean, can you imagine that happening today?
And on Ralph Mitchell's farm.
On Ralph
who
Mitchell's
was
farm.
a serious Republican.
Yeah, no, it was, he brought people together with just an honest message of truth, and that still is my favorite political thing, is it just, and all the national, this is where I said, Jesse's, what's underrated was his political genius. And while people have given me credit over the years for Greenfield being the headquarters, no, I don't, that was all Jesse's idea. Because he wanted those national reporters, when they came to Iowa, not to go to a downtown headquarters in Des Moines. They had to go to Greenfield and see all the volunteers we had, and see the movement in rural Iowa behind his campaign. And it worked. Worked not only to the national story, but it empowered us in the Iowa campaign to tell that story around Iowa, and it was okay to support Jesse Jackson. And then to see those burly farmers come up and give him a hug and start crying. It was just, every day was he was here, and I think he made over 100 visits to Iowa. We got to experience that and see that love for him. Gosh, I can go on about campaign stories.
Well, when he came to Greenfield on Super Bowl Sunday, Willard and I both thought, this is dumb, nobody's gonna come. It's like 50 below zero and the wind's blowing 100 miles an hour, and it was Super Bowl Sunday. And the church was packed.
Yeah.
There was no room at the inn. And then after it was over, and I mean, I cried through the whole thing. When it was over, we went over to Jay House to talk about, and Reverend Jackson said, I think I'm gonna have my headquarters here, and the staff looked like they were gonna have a heart attack.
They're like, really? Oh yeah, and I remember, because I was working for Dixon then, I was the director of the Farm Union Coalition,
yeah.
and I couldn't make it, but I remember having conversations with you about this is crazy. And it just shocked us all. And then I think it was in March after the Super Bowl that Jackson came back to Greenfield to have that organizing meeting. I love telling this in Chicago, at the Greenfield Country Club. Imagine telling a bunch of folks in Chicago we had, their image of country club is not the Greenfield Country Club.
You can all join for $500 today.
And we had a good, but it was more of an organizing meeting, and that's where I met Carolyn Kasdan on his national staff, and I pulled her aside, and I probably shouldn't tell this story, but they were talking to this one person about being his campaign manager. And I wasn't looking for a job. I was, in grad school, and I said, I just want to give you a heads up, that probably is not a good move. And so we ended up talking for hours that night after the event was over. Next thing I know, I got a call next week, State of Apprentice campaign in Iowa. And so I was the first person to come on board on staff in Iowa. And you guys shut me off. I'll have to keep going on these stories. But it was Jesse and Jose and Bill, the two guys that traveled with him most. And God bless Bill.
Jose Matthews.
Jose Matthews and Bill Morton. He was killed in the accident with Ron in the plane crash. But they saw it. They saw the reaction he got in Iowa. The kind of Jesse's staff in Chicago who weren't out here didn't see it. They weren't believers in it. So we had to raise the money in Iowa to pay for the Iowa campaign, which was unheard of, right? Everyone else just funnels all their national money into Iowa. I mean, you know, the caucus campaigns flying, make sure they fly people into Omaha or Moline or Minneapolis doesn't count against the cap spending in Iowa. They hire staff in those states but have them work in Iowa. They're blowing the ceiling off the spending cap, and we're passing the hat at the churches. But we discovered, because we got some buttons made in Iowa, and people wanted buttons. They wanted anything but Jesse Jackson on it. So we found this vendor and those T-shirts, and I should have dug more stuff out of my closet or my attic. We had portfolios, we had anything they had with Jackson on it. We'd order it, and we'd sell out in a week, you know. And so we started raising a lot of funds to pay for staff, and then we started shipping it around the country. So I don't know if you know this, but after Iowa, all the caucus organizers I sent to Michigan, primarily, probably 80% of them. And they wanted me in Chicago for 2 months to set up this national marketing operation. So they really helped fund a lot of the campaign with Jackson paraphernalia all over the country that we kind of did in Iowa. So there was some value in having to scrap, you know, and figure out ways to fund this that were non-traditional. And I still say to this day, if we'd have had a fourth of what Dukakis spent, because he went way over the caps, and I think he beat us by 4 points. Jackson beats Dukakis in Iowa, comes in third. It's a whole different national primary, because you can't go if you don't go to New Hampshire and you're Dukakis and you get beat by Gephardt and Simon and Jackson, it changes the whole dynamics. Because 8 weeks later, I was in Greenfield that night. We watched the results come in from Michigan, and Jackson beat Dukakis 2-1 in Michigan. They were the only two really standing at that point. And suddenly, I mean, I remember that this can happen.
The New York Times headline was, "Can Jackson really win?"
Yeah,
It was phenomenal. And so after I spent that night something in Greenfield, I was on my way to the West Coast, and we started organizing in caucus states in Arizona. And I can't remember if Oregon, I don't think Oregon was a primary, but we got 39% in those two states, and Michigan really helped. Iowa, we established this. It's okay to support Jesse, and kind of gave people that freedom. And then Michigan, you know, just put us on jet fuel, and I saw that happening down in the West, and it was possible there for a while. And I think, you know, then you got to take the onslaught of the national media and some of the donor crowd that wasn't going to let that happen. But I just heard a clip of President Obama yesterday, and then many people said it. I mean, he paved the way for what happened in 2008, and it was just an incredible part of history to be a part of, and we're all grateful. What anybody else got?
I got a couple of them.
Yes, Willard.
I'll start with what Bruce said. I was fortunate enough to be in on that, probably the most moving service. that I've ever been in my life was out in the hayfield. The day that he came, and I think it was the most beautiful rendition of Amazing Grace that I've ever heard in my life. I think he put it was a Baptist minister, I believe, or archbishop. I'm not sure of the thing in the church, but he just had a beautiful voice, and I think that he also sang Amazing Grace at the funeral. But that day, on the stillness of the hill, it was just one of the most moving things that ever happened to me in my life, and I'll never forget it. A lot of you made serious comments about what Reverend Jackson meant to us and meant to you personally, and some of the things he said. I'm going to tell you some of the stories that I had when I was on the road. First of all, before we even get on the road, we're at Jay Howe's place after the meeting at the church, and we're hatching. The plan is hatched, you know, and what Greenfield is, and Greenfield is, and it goes on, and Dick Cool, or a supervisor, was there at that meeting. I remember that, and there was a whole number of people, and we were just all fascinated. But of course, I was starstruck by it's the first time I met Reverend Jackson, and you know, he came over and sat by me and wanted to chat. Right? The only thing I'd ever done for him was in my whole life was driving in my pickup from the church to Jay House. So we're talking, and we go on, and all these ideas are coming out. We can have the headquarters at the sale barn, and well, it's not heated. All these things come out. And it gets into the evening. It gets later and later, and Posey came up, and while I was speaking with Reverend Jackson, and kept kind of hinting, we gotta get going. You know, it's 11 o'clock, it's 11, I don't know what it was late, and after a long day, but finally Jose said, he said to me, we've got to go, we've got a picture tomorrow at Dixon's farm. We're gonna take a picture of milking the cow. He said that to me. Reverend Jackson didn't.
He wasn't on board.
So finally, he just kind of like adopted me that evening, and we just clicked. And finally, I said to him, "This is great. We're going to make this work." All this kind of thing, and I said, "But you really need to get some rest because." You're going to milk a cow. And this is so personal to me because he turned to me and he said, "Mr. Willard, I ain't going to milk no cow in the morning." And for those of you who followed what happened, a Pulitzer Prize winning photo came. I can't say his name, and he's passed since then. But of course, that photo was above the fold on every paper across the country. And so that became so personal to me, and soon thereafter, I put that thing together. With the one that was in the register, and it talked about milking the cow at the Dixon Terry farm, and so I sent it to him. I made a little frame and sent it to him with the quote, "Famous last words," and then here, and doggone it, I sent that. I can't remember exactly where I sent it to him because I knew he would get it. And I sent that to him, and he got it and he called me. And it just became, all of this became so personal to me. When I think about, I had the opportunity to do a lot of what Miriam did, to do the pre-stuff, to get the place set up and things like that in Iowa. But we also did some things away from Iowa that were unique, I guess. We were out in Concord, New Hampshire, and we had arrived in the evening. It was late, dark, cold. Got up the next morning and we couldn't get anywhere. I mean, we were snowed in. I'm not sure what the plan was for that morning, but we had to abandon those plans. And so they said, well, what are we gonna do now? And so I wish I could claim credit for the idea, but I'm not sure that I get credit for it. But what he did was, he said, well, Dr. Oleson, why don't we communicate with Iowa today? We can't do anything here this morning. So what we did was, I would call KJN Radio.
In Atlantic.
In Atlantic. And I would get the director on, and I said, this is Willard Oleson, you don't know me, but I'm here with Reverend Jackson in New Hampshire, and he wants to talk with you. Of course, they'd come right on the phone. And he'd start right in, and he said, well, how's everything in Atlantic, Iowa? I understand you Trojans are gonna play the Harlan Cyclones Tuesday night. And so we did that with all of these little towns that had a radio station. I knew the Nottoway Valley Wolverines. We didn't have a radio station, but I think KSOM had a little thing in Stewart at the time. We talked about them, and we talked about all of these different places that we called. The final one that comes to mind that was fun is that same morning, he was reading the Washington Post, and he read it, and there's a paragraph or two about him traveling around working, but then there was a big story about this Dukakis guy, and he was in New York, and it was a long story, and how his campaign was going and everything. And he said something about there was a paragraph or two about Jackson. Well, Reverend Jackson said, Dr. Oleson, why don't you get Ben Bradley on the phone? I want to talk with you. Ben Bradley of the Washington Post. Willard, get him on the phone. So I went over and picked up, this is unbelievable, but it's actually true. I went over and picked up the Washington Post, and there was a phone number there for the place, so I called. And I said, I'd like to speak with Mr. Bradley, please. I'm with the Jackson campaign. And I don't know what happened, but what response I got. But all of a sudden, Bradley here. What? And so, Reverend Bill Bradley. He looks at me. Ben Bradley. So he gets on the phone with Ben Bradley, and he said, Mr. Bradley, I'm a little disappointed with your campaign coverage. I just read about this Dukakis guy out in New York, and he got all these paragraphs about what he's been doing. And I tried to find my name in your newspaper, and there might have been 2 paragraphs. He said, I'm a little tired of you covering the filet mignon circuit. Come out to Iowa, see what I'm doing on the chicken and biscuit circuit. And Ben Bradley replied, well, Mr. Dukakis is in New York, and that's news, and he covered a lot of New York. And he said, well, I'm going to be speaking to the congressional group here in New Hampshire, and I would expect some coverage from you. And later in the day, we were at the State House. In fact, I went in and they sent us to John Sununu's office, and Reverend Jackson made himself comfortable at the governor's desk and put his feet up on his desk and made himself comfortable. And when Governor Sununu walked in, Reverend Jackson said, how do I look? With his feet on the governor's desk. In any event, he did get the coverage of his address to the Congress. So that's the long and short of a few of my stories.
That's hard. I don't want to cut anybody off when the services starts. You guys decide what you want to do.
I was just thinking about the brand, not just with the cow, but when he passed, I shouldn't say the plate, the bucket, there was always some kind of bucket. So we got to the point where we made up our own bucket that branded Jesse Jackson, because we had to do that.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot of people, a lot of the PACs and all of that giving us money, because they probably thinking this guy is crazy. And so we got used to passing the bucket. But
he called people down. I mean, I learned about fundraising from
I'm like, no, we're not in church today, Reverend. We're at the Union Hall with my members who are probably 57% Republican. We got it covered.
I remember his John Norris. Where's John Norris? Bring that bucket down.
It wasn't a Jackson event if we didn't pass a bucket.
Carl, we know you had some stories.
Well, the service is live now, so
I want to hear from you though, Carl.
Yeah,
I'm more
stories to
interested
tell.
in you than this. I mean, I want the service to be nice, but tell us a story or 3.
And you guys can see it, so maybe just, if there's someone speaking we want to hear, I don't know. This is our
Yeah.
event.
Yeah.
well, one thing I will just say is that I was very impressed with Reverend Jackson the first time I sat with him. We were discussing elderly issues. I was the state long-term care ombudsman at the time. And my job was to get his thoughts together regarding elderly issues prior to a debate. And I went in, we sat down, we started talking about the issues, and he had people coming in constantly interrupting us. And I was getting frustrated, and I thought, this guy isn't paying attention to what I'm saying. But then after a while, he would say something to one of his staff writers about what he wanted to be written into his speech. And I woke up and went, this guy is paying attention. He's quite a multitasker. And I became very impressed with him from that incident, and became his follower and his advocate. So
had an amazing capacity.
He did.
I mean,
He impressed me.
he really did listen to people. Yeah. It's amazing. Anybody else want to share? Any stories? There's so many great speeches he gave in Iowa that it's hard to go through them all. I mean, the Jefferson Jackson dinner in the fall, November of '87. I gotta tell you a quick story on that one. Of course, that's back when the party raised all the money by selling tickets to Betts Auditorium, right? And I went to Chicago and I needed some money to buy we each could buy so many tickets. And they went, you're crazy, we're not gonna send you $15,000 to buy tickets. But I get his name, was running the Babbitt campaign. And they were, of course, struggling, and so we talked, and we got a lot of tickets. I don't know what it was, whatever it was, 300, 500 tickets. So I cut a deal with the Babbitt campaign. If they bought the tickets, our allotment, and gave me half of them for free, then they could have a chance to get the biggest crowd there. So all of a sudden, I've got this wad of tickets to JJ, and everyone's like, "How'd you get those?" I couldn't tell a soul. This is maybe the first time I'm telling it. And so we had half as many as anybody else had. I don't think Babbitt could even get rid of the tickets, and we made 10 times the noise of every other delegation there, and he gave a rip-roaring speech at that JJ dinner, and that really helped our momentum going into the caucuses. That was one of the many crazy
I just can't
stories.
imagine the
I remember getting that check from this guy I didn't know in Chicago for $15,000. It's past the statute of limitations, so I'm happy. And take it to the state party, and then it's okay. Sorry, Susie, you were saying.
Well, I just can't imagine the racism and the hate that he engendered, because he was so amazing, and people had these notions of the ability of people who weren't white Christians to do anything still here. And he just went up against it. Tell him about your story at the hotel. And then when he came to Greenfield, he was nervous about traveling through.
David, David was there for that one. About the safety issue?
Yeah, the safety.
Crusader, defender, etc.
Yeah, Steve, I heard this story. Sorry.
Let's see, which story are you talking
Cedar
about?
Rapids. Cedar Rapids.
Oh, sure, I can tell that one. That was really brutal.
I think it's the one time he got looks up with me the whole campaign.
He gave a speech to some group at a hotel in Cedar Rapids, a nice hotel. And John and I were in the van swinging around to pick him up after the event. And he was standing in front of the hotel, and John pulled up the van, and Jesse got in. And he was really kind of sullen. Usually he was kind of bubbly. It was a great speech, great event, great applause. And so we were just quiet for a minute. Nobody said anything. And then finally, Jackson said, "Don't ever leave me exposed like that." And we looked back at the hotel, and it was all lit up, and it was like picture perfect for an assassin's bullet. You know, he was framed in a doorway. It couldn't have been more dangerous. And I don't think we ever made that mistake again. And he let it go, but he was pissed.
We didn't ever.
What were these white guys? We didn't.
It's Iowa, you don't suspect this, you never know, but it was an eye opener for us.
Right, and he lived that every single day.
Yeah.
And I remember at the reunion in Chicago, some farmer from Missouri talked about how whenever he came through, they would line up tractors to protect him in case somebody was trying to get in to keep him from being hurt. Was how the farmer put it.
And it's interesting, he wouldn't have showed that to anybody.
No.
But you know that in the back of his head, he's thinking, but he was one of these people that, wasn't a complainer. He'll get up and he will just go to what he needs to go to and do what he needs to do, and you wouldn't have a clue. He was just really, a lot of fun. I was gonna tell you at that, the park, when I was like, before that, we had him at the Union Hall and we had cooked a spread for him. I mean, all of the stuff he liked. And I remember when he got done, because Peggy was catering, and when he got done, he goes, I've been to Waterloo today. And I'm like, and don't you forget it.
Well, Laura, didn't you drive him to Corning, and he was real nervous about the drive through the countryside? I remember that.
Yeah, I remember driving because at that time they had a little jet that they'd flown into Greenfield, and they did that once, and they were lucky enough to be able to take off, and that never happened again because our runway was way too short. But he had an acrobatic pilot that decided to do this, but then I drove him to Corning because he didn't want any part of that.
Yeah, you could. Oh, no, unless they can hear it. I can hear Miriam because she's projecting this way.
I don't have a Jesse story, but I can talk about, this fear of being shot. I mean, Dolph Pulley was one of our great basketball players, and then after he became the first black journalist, TV journalist in Iowa, in 1969, he told his story when he retired. And you never forget these things, and how he was getting death threats every day back in '69. And he actually had the FBI helping him. And he said he had to take different routes to get to work down at KCCI. And he said, hey, I was losing weight, I couldn't sleep, it was really real. And hey, to Governor Ray's credit, he's a Drake Law and Drake undergraduate, and he knew Dolph, and apparently had told him that if you ever need, if you come back, you don't take those offers to play for the Boston Celtics or the Dallas Cowboys and stay in Iowa, you don't hesitate to call me if you run in. So he did call the governor and told him what was going on. He said, well, he said, calm down, and told him personally. He said, well, let me think about this. I'm stunned, And 2 days later, he called me back and said, hey, every press conference I have, every public setting I want, you're going to be by my side. And so that was what he did for the next 2 months, and the death threat stopped. So, good credit to our governor, for sure. But hey, I would imagine, knowing Dolph's prominence in the African American community and the Des Moines community, he probably talked to Jesse at different times and probably said, hey, it can happen here too.
Wow.
I just think about how fortunate we are that we can live in this beautiful state and go wherever we want to go and do whatever we want to do. And, I can't speak for anybody else, but people have been kind, gracious, and always want to help and encourage. So, kudos to Iowa.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Hey.
I never had the pleasure of meeting Jesse Jackson, but I heard his name frequently. During the bus strike. Also, I moved to Southern Illinois and I went to SIU Edwardsville where we were protesting war. That's downstate. It wasn't up in Chicago where all the big action seemed to be going on. But the one thing I really got out of him, he was so passionate about civil rights. He was so passionate about equality. And he was very passionate about the United States of America and how it should be. And this morning, about 4 o'clock when I woke up, before I fell back asleep and didn't get up again, I read about him, and I read Obama's speech that he gave, in which he, without Jesse Jackson, so much of what has happened would not have happened. We wouldn't have had Obama in the presidency if it hadn't been for Jesse Jackson, because he inspired people. And it was a terrific life that he led. And I just really appreciate the fact that he was here on Earth, in the United States of America, in Chicago, Illinois, and all over the map, to inspire people to fight for justice, to fight for equality, to fight for us.
Thanks, sir.
It's amazing that he got white farmers and union folks, and the way he brought people together was extraordinary. And they saw their commonality, which is amazing. I can't imagine that today.
Well, I think some of you know that I have to leave.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cook for 2 rugby teams, and my son is playing for Air Force in Des Moines today, so it's a treat for me. So I'm just gonna hand this over. You guys, you know, what we talked about locking up and stuff.
Yep.
And stay and share stories, watch as much as you want, and if you wouldn't mind grabbing a sign-in sheet, put your name and email and phone number on there, and I'll make a list up and send it all to you, so we can, just a better way for us to stay in contact, and because this has been great to see so many good friends from that incredible experience.
Thanks for getting me.
John, thanks for putting this
Sure.
together. You did a lot of work on this. We appreciate all you've done.
And just in case you don't know, John's working on a huge water project. The legislature doesn't seem to be interested in that, but John is, and that's gonna make a difference for us.
Bravo.
So,
And I dug through part of my attic and grab a Jesse button if you want, or a couple t-shirts there, and I got a few more things to hand out.
Everyone sign in.
I don't know if I have enough for everybody, but if you want to, Jesse.
No, I
there's a
thought I
few
was the only one that did that.
And there's quite a few Run Jesse Run albums here if you want to Run Jesse Run albums.
Vinyl.
Yeah, one.
I mean, one of the points I was trying to make,
Happy to have that.
There you go, sure.
I remember it as he's saying it.
Can you explain
On the other hand, I'm not so sure.
the spending caps?
Hmm?
I don't remember what the rules were for the spending caps. Was that a DNC thing?
I can't remember if it was DNC or a campaign finance disclosure or whatever the national.
So the campaigns were limited in how much they could
Yes,
spend
yes.
in Iowa or in each state?
Yep.
I did not
I don't
know
know if
that.
it was just the early. I think it was a DNC rule, but it might have been a federal rule. But I think that there was some cap on the early states.
Okay.
That was part of keeping it more competitive.
I'll see what I can dig up on that.
Yeah.
I just did not remember that angle to
no,
it.
and there were, so campaigns figured out how to work around it, like I explained.
Right.
And here we are passing the buck at churches. When Jerry Austin came on in about October, I think, that changed because he saw what was happening here and he realized the significance of Iowa. And then we started getting some national funds in to help staff up, and we even had we had TV. I remember when our first TV ad came on, and we were all like, "Oh my gosh, this is real!" All that stuff actually came at the right time because it forced us for about 6 months to just build largely volunteer-driven operation, which I always think is better and we forced us to build that volunteer-driven operation. So then we finally had funds, and then we could bring in some staff and some airtime. It brought a whole new level of energy and enabled us to put together. I remember I should have brought the brochure. I've got the first brochure we did about how do you caucus, because so many people had never caucused before that were coming out for Jesse, which is part of the value to the party. He brought new voters out,
Sure.
and it was just the basics. and people just needed to feel like they had enough confidence to know how it was going to work. And so we did caucus trainings all over the state, and so many of the attendees was they'd never caucused before. So, and then so that it actually, like I think, made us stronger. I think to not have that huge influx of money at the start.
And why did he call Willard Doc? Why did he call Willard Doc? Or Doctor?
Doc. He called both Willard and me Dr. Norris and Dr. Olson. He just liked to call us that every time he's Dr. Norris. He called when I saw him in Chicago 2 years ago. He still calls me Dr. Norris. I don't know, but he just maybe he knew it made us. It was just he had a way of making you feel valued. Maybe that was one of his traits, but people would always be right, because Willard traveled a lot, and he'd do anything, carry luggage with the press or drive Jackson. But he got to calling us whenever he sees us Dr. Norris and Dr. Olson, and it was just, it was part of what made you love him.
I know you've got to get going.
That's
Thank
fine.
you.
Yes.